What is key differences between BIOS, CSM, POST, and UEFI is that BIOS is an older firmware interface, while UEFI is a newer, more advanced version. What is BIOS? Every computer with a motherboard includes a special chip referred to as the BIOS or ROM BIOS, read-only memory basic input-output system. The BIOS includes instructions on how to load basic computer hardware. The BIOS also includes a test referred to as a POST, power on self-test, which will ensure that the computer meets requirements to boot up properly. If the computer does not pass the POST, you will receive a combination of beeps indicating what is malfunctioning within the computer. The BIOS has four main functions. 1. POST. Test computer hardware, ensuring hardware is properly functioning before starting process of loading operating system. 2. Bootstrap loader. Process of locating the operating system. If capable operating system located, BIOS will pass the control to it. 3. BIOS. Software. Drivers which interfaces between the operating system and your hardware. When running DOS or Windows, you are using complete BIOS support. 4. CMOS setup. Configuration program, which allows you to configure hardware settings including system settings such as computer passwords, time, and date. UEFI versus BIOS. What's the difference? UEFI versus BIOS are the two main firmware interfaces, FI, that are critical to loading an operating system, OS, in a computer's memory or RAM. They usually serve similar purposes, or you can say UEFI is a modernized version of BIOS. However, there are more technical complications and differences between the two that you must understand. What is BIOS? BIOS is a fundamental firmware interface that has existed for decades. Although it was invented in 1975, it was first incorporated into International Business Machines, IBM, First Personal Computer, PC, in 1981. BIOS is a short form of Basic Input and Output System. How does BIOS work? As discussed, BIOS is firmware that sits on a chip on a computer's motherboard. Systems usually come equipped with it, unlike an operating system that a user or manufacturer cannot install. A microprocessor can only access it on an erasable programmable read-only memory chip, also known as EPROM. What is UEFI? UEFI, short for Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, is a modernized firmware that ended the popularity of BIOS. Intel released its first open-source implementation in 2004. The latest version of the firmware, 2.10, was updated in August 2022, a couple of years before. How does UEFI work? Similar to middleware, it serves as a link between the operating system and the hardware parts of a computer. It helps with the startup process and provides a way for the OS to cooperate with the system's firmware. It provides multiple benefits over the BIOS. Unlike BIOS, whose support was shut down in 2020, UEFI does offer support for more extensive storage devices such as solid-state drives. Moreover, it provides seamless boot times and several website security benefits. The primary purpose of creating advanced firmware was to overcome the constraints and restrictions of BIOS. For high performance and secure hosting, consider using a dedicated SSD server to take full advantage of these benefits. CSM stands for Compatibility Support Module, which allows legacy BIOS to boot on UEFI systems. POST, a set of diagnostic tests that BIOS performs to check that the computer's hardware components are working properly. POST tests peripheral devices like the keyboard, mouse, disk drives, and video cards. If any critical component fails the POST test, the computer might not boot. Conclusion: as you can see, UEFI and BIOS both have their own characteristics. However, the discussion made it crystal clear that UEFI is the optimal choice because it provides much better security and more advanced features. Although it offers better qualities and options, it is essential to understand that UEFI is not for everyone, especially those with older devices. However, it also depends upon the individual choice, making this UEFI or BIOS choice subjective. Considering your system's requirements before deciding on one is always wise. UEFI is the optimal choice over BIOS for users seeking enhanced performance and security. To maximize these benefits, consider AltaHost's managed WP hosting for seamless website management and top-tier support modules, including device drivers for motherboard hardware and attached peripheral devices.